Welcome to the Spoilercast for Rehydrate. This episode will contain spoilers for all of the Three-Body Problem, The Dark Forest, and Death's End. If you don't want to be spoiled on future events, please skip this episode. This is Season 3, Episode 6, The Snow Program, where we will be discussing the conclusion of The Dark Forest by Lucy Shin. My name is Amin, and I have only read up to the current point.
Hi, this is Dan. I've read the entire series.
Hi, my name is Thalia. I have listened to all of the Remembrance of Earth's Past, and I'm rereading along with the Spoilercast.
I want to give a couple updates about the show itself. I mentioned this on the main show, but for people who might just listen to the Spoilercast, just so you know, first of all, I posted a season summary of season 1. So if you wanted to go back and remember what happened for the Three-Body Problem without reading the whole book again, there is an audio format where I just compile all the stuff I talked about in season 1. But then on every episode on the website at rehydrate.space, we also have the episode summaries. You can go back and read them if you wish or want to refresh yourself without having to read the whole book. And I also want to talk about next season's plans. Next season is, we have another season that's in production right now that's called Unfathomable, which is our music podcast, which is season 4. It hasn't been released yet, but it will be hopefully soon. We, at the same time, are going to be going right into Death's End, which will be called season 5. So look out for that in your feed. And we also will be having guest hosts on the main show, which includes our very own Thalia, and as well as some others who will be helping us break down the finale of the Remembrance of Earth's Past series. And I will talk about the brief summary of this finale episode of The Dark Forest. We start with Beijing descending into chaos after they hear about both the droplet attack and the Battle of Darkness. We have Luo Ji waiting for the droplet to come and kill him, and it doesn't. It actually goes and blocks the sun with electromagnetic waves to block out more broadcasting using the sun. His spell works as 187J3X1 is destroyed, and Luo Ji explains the Dark Force principle to Da Shi. Luo Ji seemingly wastes his time on a little known and little cared about snow project, which actually turns out to be super important and the start of the deterrence era, as he comes to a understanding with the Trisolarans to let them open up the sun for communication. In return, we will not broadcast the coordinates of the Trisolarans to the universe and have it destroyed. So I wanted to start off this episode. I had this thought, and I was going to surprise Amin with it, but I actually gave him a little bit of preparation ahead of time so he could think about it. I thought, we've been spoiling the series for 2 seasons now, and I was thinking it would be a fun experiment is if Amin gave us what his understanding of what happens in Death's End in as much detail as you want to give.
So keeping in mind that my brain is a sieve and I retain almost nothing. So this is my guess as to what happens in Death's End based on the things I recall Thalia and Dan mentioning to me. So at the end of this book, we learn about the dead man switch that Luo Ji has and that the truce with the Trisolarans basically depends on that. So I imagine, and also I remember Dan and Thalia saying that Luo Ji has a smaller role in the next book. So I'm assuming or guessing that he decides to hand over the dead man switch to somebody else, and he goes off and lives the rest of his life with his wife and kid. Maybe they go into hibernation and come back later, but I don't remember if that's how it works or not, but I'm assuming, I think something like that probably happens just based on how you've described that the third book has a different protagonist than this book. The other thing, and I think I talked about this on the main episode, is that there are all these ships that are out there, and I'm guessing they'll come back and with either new information about the Trisolarans or something else that will upset the truce. The other thing I think I remember about Death's End is that it jumps ahead in time many, many years. So I'm guessing the book's going to end with the end of the universe, more or less, or some version of the end of the universe. Maybe I made this up, but maybe there's a multiverse somewhere. But yeah, that's kind of my terrible, terrible guess as to what happens at Death's End based on the last 12 spoiler casts that I've been participating in.
Has it really been that long?
Yeah. That's pretty good. I mean, there's obviously a lot of details that we threw out there and kind of cavalierly just mentioned them, and I guess the main purpose that like I wanted to see is like what points like stuck in your mind of like what are the big things that are happening, right?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
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 So that
What
that
are the
those are the
important beats?
right. Because like I know I've been spoiled in other stuff before, and then like you watch and be like, oh, I didn't understand it at all. Like, what the hell? But like you kind of know, you kind of pick up on one point or whatever. I remember the only thing that really sticks in my mind is like someone spoiled like parts of Pulp Fiction for me, and the scene where Jules is like pointing the gun at the guy, you know, and with the hamburger, and
Yeah.
like someone mentioned that to me, and like that's the only thing I picked up on. But it was totally
How can you
different from my
spoil Pulp
understanding.
Fiction though? Like
I
the
know.
delivery is just makes that movie, and like that Bible verse recitation,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
dialogue. How can you spoil that?
I know, yeah. But like my understanding of what the movie was totally different. Obviously, when you see it, like, oh, that didn't matter. I mean, it matters obviously to the story,
Right,
but
right. I think
it's
Amin
like,
did a great job. When you first said the prompt, I was like, uh-oh. And it reminded me of that like meme from a couple years ago, but like poorly explain the plot to a movie. And
yeah.
it's like depressed widowed father meets up with a mentally challenged woman to find his disabled son. And that's the plot of Finding Nemo.
That's pretty great.
That's what I thought it was going to be like. So with those expectations, I thought it was, at least as far as content, really great. I think it maybe undersells some of the drama and the heart. Yeah, better than I would have expected.
I'm a little bit surprised you, as many times as I've mentioned it, you didn't. You did mention the multiverse, and that's sort of
Mm.
the case, but it's not the important
Right, he
part.
said
Isn't
multiverse, and I was like, I
Yeah, it's not so much
guess.
the higher than 3 dimensions that becomes important, it's the lower than 3 dimensions that becomes super important.
Ooh, yeah.
Or, you know, it's probably the most consequential thing, and there are big jumps in the timeline. In fact, we jump about 18 billion years into the future.
Hmm.
So, yeah, there's pretty significant jumps into the future. There is I think you're closest on your description of Law G. He becomes what's called a sword holder, and that's basically just the deterrence. Like I mentioned in the summary, this is the start of what's called the deterrence area. And so, especially in this book, everything is kind of broken up by era. And I've talked a lot about like the common era and the crisis era. And now, like right after this happens, we enter the deterrence era. And that's kind of the beginning of the next book. Anyway, Law G is at the beginning, the sword holder of basically the button to broadcast the coordinates tries to layers, and that's what keeping him at bay. And there is a handoff to the main character.
Hmm.
And the deterrence era very quickly fails because she does not want to press that button. We kind of find out that the cooperation that's seemingly happening between the humans and the Trisolarans, like it's all a ruse. They just like quickly pounce upon the new sword holder and kind of take over Earth.
Yeah. So what I've learned from this is if anyone's listening to you, just the spoiler cast to do a book report on any of these books, you
Yeah,
should
yeah.
not, because clearly there's a lot of holes in what we talk about here.
Yeah, and there's a lot of nuance. Yeah, like Talia said,
Yeah.
there's like so much like nuance and characterization that happens.
Yeah, there is. But it reminded me of actually the last episode of the main show. I think it was called Droplet, episode 5, I believe. And I think it was even Amin who mentioned that part of the way that the plot twists for Liu Cixin is not like, characters are necessarily revealing certain relationships they didn't have before or any kind of gotcha moment like that. It's more like the whole camera will pull back and reveal that it's actually a much bigger scale than you imagined, or it's actually like you thought we were outgunned, but turns out like we're completely like we brought like a water balloon to the gunfight.
Right.
And I think that does continue to happen because even as we're mentioning the Trisolarans, I'm like, wow, the Trisolarans, like I remember them, but they're not really a focus of the third book in the way that they were such a big fear. I remember at the end of Three Body being kind of worried, being like, oh no, like humanity has they have no chance whatsoever. And then it sort of develops as we see that evolving with deterrence and having, maybe use some strategy or just some old strategies of war to gain an edge. But then again, we just zoom out so much further in the third book. So that's what I remember from the third book, zooming out.
The Trisolar has become like the victim, halfway through the book or so.
Mm-hmm.
In the main podcast, and I don't know if this actually makes the final edits or not, but you've mentioned to Tim a couple of times that he shouldn't even look at the names of the eras of
Yeah.
Death's End, and he should just read it. So what are the? So I didn't go and look at those as I was just jotting down my notes about what I recollect. But what are the spoilers in that do you think? Or is it not a spoiler? Is it just more exciting to
No,
see
there's
the
a
jump?
huge spoiler. I mentioned like we kind of jump in for. I have the book right in front of me. So the first couples aren't that bad. So we go. I'll just read the eras in order here. So we have the Common Era, which is the the era before we knew about the Trisolarans or Earth knew about them. Then we have the Crisis Era, which was basically the entirety of Dark Forest. Then we have the Deterrence Era, which is right after that, and then we have the Post-Deterrence Era, which is after the Swordholder fails. And then we have the broadcast era, which basically means now we actually broadcast the coordinates to Trisolaris. Then we have the bunker era, which was a mechanism to save humanity, but it doesn't work. And then we have, right after that, we have galaxy era, which is 2273 to unknown. They don't know how long it is. And then the biggest spoiler, I mean, these names are all just names, right? Like, I think you wouldn't have been
Yeah.
spoiled by those. But then we get into the next ones, which is Black Domain era for DX3906 system, which is 2687 until 18 billion. So, and then we have the timeline for universe 647, which is 18 billion until ... So the big spoiler there is that we're gonna jump like way ahead in time to 18 billion years from basically like our current timeline.
Whoa. This is like a minor point, but is it 18 billion or 18 million? Because 18 million like is a geologic era. We know stuff about things that was happening on the Earth 18 million, but 18 billion, like Earth who? There was no Earth.
So I'm reading it. It's 18 million, right?
I was lost in the sauce with all the digits as well, but I was just like, wait a minute, we couldn't know anything from 18 billion because they actually one of the stunning. I don't even know if I should spoil what happens before and after that jump. I mean, what's your tolerance on this point?
I'm all about the spoilers because I will not remember. So
yeah, so there's this whole idea of like, because you won't remember. There's this whole idea of like, how can you send messages through time, or how can you preserve like a seed of civilization that comes up all throughout the books of like, maybe we can have a colony of humans, or maybe we can keep the Trisolarans on Mars and preserve a seed of Trisolaran civilization, or maybe we can send this ship out of the two-dimensional universe, a two-dimensional solar system, and they'll survive. And again, there's that preservation desire and instinct across time. So humanity looks up, can we put something on digital storage, or in fact physical storage? And they actually do manage to have some kind of storage between the time before the 18 million year jump and after. It's difficult to do, obviously, but they do manage to find a way to send information, from the past to the far distant future. How would you save a message? Would you like put it in a bottle, put some paper in a glass bottle, and send it to your lover across the sea? How would you think you could possibly save information? I mean,
that's a good question. I was going to say something geological, but over 18 million years, that probably won't persist.
I mean, you're in a super information age, so like any kind of quantum computer or whatever you want, you've got it. So you can answer beyond what you have access to right now. But I'm just very curious.
I don't know, 18 million is such a long time.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I would try to figure out something astronomical. I'm assuming space travel is still a thing. So can I put the message somewhere else?
That's a good idea. I'm curious because, like, you do wonder, because Liu Cixin does devote like a whole chapter to like explaining different ways that people tried to store information and how most of them were just really short-sighted and really short. But so you can definitely read about this in Death's End. But I was wondering if you could tell ahead of time. I don't think I could tell ahead of time, like the right quote unquote answer. I feel like maybe like preserve something in amber. So we have really old like
bugs that's true.
In amber. Just write something down, stick it in there.
Yeah, I was thinking about amber, but I'm over 18 million. If the surface temperature of the Earth rises to such a point that the amber does not remain,
that's a problem.
Remain in the same phase as it is now, or same state.
Well, good news is there's no more Earth. So
Oh.
surface temperature of the Earth is not a problem. But maybe if you shoot it into space where it's cold, I guess.
Yeah, even if you preserve it in amber, like, and that their sun goes supernova and destroys the planet, it's
Right.
not going to help you.
That's a good point.
I don't think it's possible for him to come up with the answer.
Well, read and find out. But yeah, I thought it was a good prompt. Like, what do you think the third book is about based on what we've spoiled for you? What if he like just started reciting the book, like chapter one?
That shows how good of a spoilers we're giving him, right?
And what did his answer show us instead?
Yeah, I think he got the major bullet points, kind of. I mean, like obviously, like just, I think it's really hard to maintain and retain the nuance that happens, and I don't, it's hard to convey even without reading it, right? That's why the book is there. But I think you got the major kind of big parts. There's just a lot of cool stuff that happens in between those big parts. Speaking of characters, the one thing that you mentioned on the main show is that when we're talking about potential plot points for the next book in a non-spoiler way and what you think is going to happen, and you had mentioned that there might be some people who were either in stasis or had been involved anyway, and they might not be so happy with the Earth Trisolarian cooperation. So we do have a character like that, sorta. I mean, I would say like Wade is a character who, he's not like really anti-Trisolarian or anything, but he's just really kind of militaristic, and he has like the kind of thinking of which blow stuff up just just to be safe. He is sort of the antagonist, if there is an antagonist for the next book. So there is sort of that character. I don't know how would you characterize him that way, Talia?
As an antagonist?
Yeah.
Not really an antagonist. I just think, I mean, Chung Sheen, who's maybe the protagonist, ends up like thanking him and giving him more credit than anyone else. So maybe like a foil more than an antagonist.
But he actually, shoots her. He tries to kill her. So
he does try to kill her, but then they repair their relationship and move on from that.
Yeah.
You brought up a good point about like he would rather just shoot them and get it out of the way. Like it's because of people like Wade that we're in the Dark Forest at all. So I don't know if you can like make him the antagonist, because it's like everyone had to be like him or else we wouldn't be in this situation to begin with. I could be convinced otherwise though.
Yeah, I was thinking about it actually today when I was preparing for this episode. Like, we had that other prompt of heroes versus villains, and I didn't choose Wade. And I was thinking, well, is he actually a villain? I mean, it's hard to say, right? Like, he has villainous qualities, I guess. He shoots a girl just to get his political way. Every dictator or every evil person thinks they're doing the right thing, right? And he thinks he's doing the right thing by trying to kill Chung Xin so he can become the sword holder, be a man enough, or quote unquote man enough, to send the broadcast to destroy Trisolairs where Chung Xin wouldn't and doesn't. So does that make him a villain?
We have an actual example of someone who does that and is not considered a villain. You say that Wade tried to kill Chung Xin like a dictator would to ensure that their world order comes to pass. I mean, that's exactly what Zhang Beihai did. He did it to guide the course of humanity's research.
Right. Yeah. So like that's another reason I probably wouldn't choose Zhang Beihai as the hero of the story either, even though his method worked, I guess, in the end, right? Like the blue space gets out there through roundabout means to actually preserve humanity in a way, because of like the curvature propulsion hadn't worked and they didn't develop light speed ships, like they would be the only people out there to preserve humanity, and that's a direct.
Well, it's a direct result of both of them. Can't you argue that? Like of both of them though, like Wade was the one who invested in enough fundamental research to create light speed ships, and Zhang Beihai came before him to make humanity think bigger. I don't know. It's complicated for me to assign him the role of villain. Is all
I mean, I think that's on purpose, right? And I think that's why it's cool.
Oh yeah.
I think like if there's anybody who wouldn't be who's very suspicious of the Trisolarians, and about like the Earth Trisolarian cooperation, it was Wade. Like Wade is that person.
Yeah, I think we discussed in maybe it was this handoff, maybe in this episode of the last one, about the levels of deterrence. Like we come to the age of deterrence with the Snow Project, but of course that does depend on one person holding the switch. And we talk about like, I had to think about, and maybe you'll answer this in your next season, but like, what do you think your own personal level of deterrence would be? Because they evaluate it from 0 to 100.
Oh yeah, it would be super low. Like for me personally,
Yeah, for
it'd be
you
like very
personally,
close to the
Dan.
Changxin. Like there's no way I could make that kind of decision to destroy an entire civilization. I would not be a good sword holder.
How about you, Amin? Can you self-evaluate?
I'd like to think I would be more rational, but I'm probably with Dan. I think actually making that decision would be really hard, but
I would definitely hesitate and not be able to make that life or death decision.
So you see that like Luoji, when he creates deterrence, he immediately tries to say, like, when they start to try and negotiate, he's like, no, 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 no. Talk to my manager, not my problem. Other heads will deal with it, because he doesn't want to be the one holding that decision. And then, as we see in the third book, it ends up being him for almost 100 years. It's such a
Yeah.
despicable job. Like, no one would want to have that much responsibility. So maybe Amin will take back his choice of being Luoji for the 5-year vacation.
Yeah, like yeah, you had mentioned last time that
yeah,
that's the character you wanted to be, and that is a cool 5 years of
Yeah, for
living in
sure.
luxury and getting the cool wine off of the bottom of the ocean and everything. Yeah, he ends up like literally wall facing for like 100 years and just like sitting there watching for the Trisolarans to do anything and being ready to destroy them if they do any aggressive movements.
how does he end up handing off that responsibility to someone else? Does he just die of natural causes?
No, the humanity chooses to elect a new one,
Oh, okay.
and there's a kind of conflict between the main character and the person we're talking about, Wade, to see like who should hold it. Where Wade is a lot more militaristic, and Changxin is more optimistic and nurturing, that kind of thing. And so humanity eventually chooses Changxin to be the sword holder, and then Trisolayer like immediately attacks, and like they see right through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, Luoji's just like the Pope. He just like stepped down because he was old. There's not really
I see.
evidence that he was like forced out of that position. They're just like, yeah, we kind of want to have a backup plan before we absolutely need to. So they hold the elections, and Changxin does, win, and it becomes very clear that Trisolaris not only seizes the moment, but actually later we get evidence that they like were planning for this even as much as 5 years ago. They could tell the type of person that humanity would elect, and that it turned out to be like a perfect guess.
Right.
I hope the first half of Death's End is just Luigi complaining about being this person for 100 years. It's just
he
him.
doesn't
Read it
even
and find
talk.
out.
Oh,
Read it and find out. Yeah, he may have gone like mute.
Yeah, remember like right after he becomes sword lord, he can't talk for a while because his voice, because then they meet Sofan later on, and like he's still getting his voice back. And Logi shows up a little bit later on, but he's like at the beginning of the book. Well, is he a monster because he destroyed this solar system, and like maybe that, how did he know that it doesn't have planet life on it? Eventually, he's the only person who can carry out deterrence. So he does that job for 100 years or whatever.
It's a terrible job. He's done it for so long, but also to cap it off, humanity resents him for it. They're not grateful.
Right. The next thing as I was re-listening to our last episode, so Tim brought up a question, and I don't know if I mean you have the same question of, do we ever meet the Trisolarans, and do we meet them, see what they look like, interact with them? So the answer is no, not in canon anyway. But there is a fan fiction book that's called Redemption of Time that apparently Lo Shishin likes, but he didn't write. If you guys are up for it, I haven't read it. They do have a description of the Trisolarans. Do you guys want to hear it? I don't know if you have interest in reading it.
I'm game. I haven't read it either. Yeah.
So apparently in this book, it kind of focuses on Yu and Ming meeting back up with the Trisolarans. And this is my secondhand knowledge of what happens. I haven't read the book, and I only talked to somebody who read the book. She had said that what happens is he meets the Trisolarans, but then there's no Trisolarans around. It actually ends up being the Trisolarans are actually like bug sized, and like they're super tiny, and so he can't see them without like looking at it. I don't know much more than that, but like that's kind of the twist there, is that they're bugs themselves, and they're not self-aware enough to know that they're calling us bugs, but they're actually the bug sized.
Interesting.
So I guess, do you care that we in canon don't actually meet the Trisolarans? Like we see an envoy of them that is basically like a robot version of a Trisolaran, but it's not what they actually look like. But that's the most physical representation we have of the actual Trisolarans. But does that bother you at all?
No, I don't think it bothers me. I think it would be so. No, it doesn't bother me. At the end of Three Body Problem, I think we quote unquote we read about the Trisolarans and we're in their world. So I'm just curious how that's going to translate to the series, if they're how they're going to interpret that, or if it's going to be something more mysterious, if the Trisolarian's appearance is supposed to be mysterious.
That's true. That's a good point. Like, I don't know how they're gonna film that. Maybe I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna do that without revealing what the Trisolarians look like. How are they gonna show the Trisolarian conversations happening? And on top of that, there's another chapter that we have in Descent coming up where it's a perspective of a totally different alien. How are they gonna show what they look like? Because we have no idea what they look like. So
I think it would be a real shame if we cut out any Trisolarans just to try and preserve the idea that we don't know what they look like, because definitely far and away my favorite chapter from Three Body Book 1 was like when they're discussing with the High Consul and saying like, do we have permission to unfold this proton? And there's this back and forth, and it has these consequences on their city, and then they go through this whole process of actually suffering this long winter in order to complete their engineering project. Like, it's a little like World War II effort right on their planet, and if that was just skipped, I think it would really just do a disservice to the series.
Totally. Yeah. The only thing I can think of is that, like, in the Three Body world, we're already seeing like avatars, like, human avatars of like Einstein and Copernicus and those kind of things. Maybe they'll continue that into a little bit further.
It would keep some actors employed.
Yeah. And so, yeah, maybe like we'll see human avatars of like Trisolarians, even though we don't actually see Trisolarians, because I think it would be a disservice to the book and to the series to actually like make Trisolarians. As interesting as a thought of experiment is that they are bug size, like I don't think that would actually work for real. It wouldn't be interesting enough for the show. Yeah, so I also hope they keep that part in, because that part was great. Also my favorite part of book 1. So it would be really bad if they didn't have that at all.
Imagine if you like meet a spacefaring civilization and you try and board their ship and it's like a grain of rice. Like, that would be such a bummer.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess things don't need to be the way that they are on Earth, but as humans, we dedicate a lot of really valuable space and resources and energy to having a really big brain. Like, it's hard to imagine that we could be outmaneuvered by a bug, because you sacrifice a lot to be as light and tiny as a bug. I don't know. Maybe I'm too deep into this fan fiction, which I haven't read.
I've only heard like very mixed reviews of it anyway. Priya was the one who told me about it, one of my other guests, and she had said like the first half is good. The second half is not very good. Like, I think she was saying the author tries to have like the big scientific concepts like leadership in death, but it's not as successful. I mean, it's hard to do, right? Because like he's among the best of what he does. Hard to replicate that. Question I had for Thalia, more follow-up from the latest episodes you haven't got a chance to listen to. Both Tim and Amin said it seemed like there was a common thread between both you guys about the least favorite part of this book was like there's not a lot of characters to hang on to. And I think that improves in book 3. Like, I think we have a definitive main character throughout the entire book. She has foils, to some degree of foils. She goes through trials and tribulations and ups and downs. And I think we really, me personally, I root for her, right? And she has her awesome side character who's always rooting for her too. So I think there's a lot more characterization in book 3. I guess, would you agree with that, Thalia?
More characterization. I do think there is more characterization, but I don't think that that's like the reason to keep following, if that makes sense. Like, there's some really interesting characters who like don't even have Wikipedia pages because they're not important to the plot. But I think like Tal Bean, who is the youngest candidate for the sword holder, and you sort of think he's done with his arc, and then we're 400 years in the future and Changxin wakes up and it's like, oh, you're here. You got sent to the future as well. And then he takes her on a tour of like the new bunker era, and they have some interesting, exposition, honestly. Like, they're there for exposition, but it's just interesting to follow characters over this longer period of time. So I thought it was maybe not more character driven, but there was more development.
I guess like the main question is like, after we finish this book, do you think there'll still be like science concepts were good, but the characters are still lacking? I don't think that will be the case.
Nah, if you still think that after the 3rd book, we tried our best.
I mean, like, there's a lot of people who don't like the main character of book 3, and there's there's reasons for that I don't agree with. And, we've talked about that at length as well. And, we'll get more into that as we finish the book. And I'm interested to hear both Tim and Amin's, your perspective on it, because she is pretty much the biggest quote unquote controversy, I guess, of the fandom. Like a lot of people really hate her. And I think those people are probably just misogynist at heart, and they're okay with, I don't know why. That's my only guesses of why they would hate her so much.
Was that part of Dan Wong's, who we talked about last week? Was that one of his objections to the third book, or was his objection strictly on plot?
Speaking of misogyny, did you remember what he said? Not that I'm saying he's a misogynist at all. He was saying that there are misogynistic elements in Remembrance of Earth's Past, and I'm nodding along like, all right, yeah, he's going to talk about his dream lover. And instead he's like, in the third book, they describe the world as feminized. And I was like, that's not really the conflict that I see. At all.
Yeah. I don't remember that being his knock on the third. I don't remember what his knock on the third books was. I guess we'll talk about this again, but other than like he thought it was trite and Hollywood and dismal, right? Those are his main knocks. Like I don't remember any like specific.
Less cultural.
We don't need to revisit his whole argument. I was just trying to connect the dots to the last episode, and clearly there's not a dot to connect, so you can just delete this whole part.
No. I mean, I would guess that like his distaste in the third book is probably rooted in his dislike for the main character in the third book, because that seems to be what a lot of people hang on to. And I'm sure there's valid reasons. I don't fathom them right now based off of what I've read. It just seems to be like, oh, Changxin sucks because she didn't activate deterrence, and she shut down Lightspeed stuff because she's a soft-hearted girl and doesn't have the stomach to do it, that kind of stuff. And like that stuff, it's not valid.
You talk about characters, like the idea being you couldn't enjoy the third book if you don't agree with the character.
Yeah,
because I just don't know if I can track that. I really liked the first book, and like I didn't really agree with Wang Miao because I didn't really think he had a strong personality. So
I'm saying like I think of some people, like if there's, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like the main knock on the book was that there's no like character that you're invested in as much. I think in like Game of Thrones series, like you'll be really invested in some of the characters, like either good or bad characters or both, right? Where in especially Three-Body Problem, I think Three-Body Problem is the worst of all of them as far as characterization, because Wang Miao is basically just there, an exposition machine, right? Like he's just there to receive information. It doesn't really bring that much to the story. Yeah, Wen Jie, I think, does. Wang Miao as a main character of that book doesn't really do much. And even like the Dark Forest, that because the character shifts so much and like you don't really know what Logi's importance is. Like you can tell he's the main character because of the volume of information, but like you don't get a whole lot about him until the very end. The beginning is like, oh, he's this playboy guy who like sleeps on women, you just remember the names of, and that's not much of a person you're going to really like dig into that much, and that's not going to be a problem for the third book, because that's what I was getting after. So I mean, correct me that how I was wrong about your opinion there.
No, that's absolutely how I felt. Correct.
My main question was like, I think that is not going to be a problem when it comes to the third book. Like her or hate her, Changxin is the main character, and she has a lot of personality and a lot to root or for or against, or be annoyed that she doesn't do things. But at least like she's there, and like that's someone to really hang on to and be that kind of central character, in addition to all the really, really awesome scientific stuff that happins and world building stuff that happens. Like the third book just has like 10x of what the second book has in terms of all that.
I don't want to like beat a dead horse or be a broken record, since I know this is the last time you'll hear me talk about Changxin for quite some time. But I think the excuse of she didn't make the right choices is just not a good enough one to like have the level of hate and vitriol for a character. One of my favorite, it's a bit of a cheesy movie. This is not like a film. This is a movie. One of my favorite movies is Mission Impossible 6. I thought the franchise was, good at doing what it likes to do and like delivering high action. But one of the things that was impossible about, what is it called? Fallout, maybe? Is that everything possible goes wrong. Like every single choice that would have led their plan to be tightly closed and like finished goes wrong. And yeah, maybe Changxin gets in the way of tying up the story in a nice way, but I like to think of it like, if you look at what Wade suggests, people like to hold up Wade as the example, and if he'd been in charge, we would have had Lightspeed ships sooner. Not true at all. Wade tells Changxin to sell her star. that, it's given to her out of unrequited pure love. He's like, sell it, it's worthless, you better just drop the price. And if she'd done that, she couldn't have made her multi-millions that let her start the company, which then gave Wade the power to do anything. Like, love actually is not just a sweet, compassionate thing. It ends up being the right choice over and over again. And that's what I think the third book is about.
Yeah, and it's not like Wade even came up with the idea of curvature propulsion. He just ruled this company with an iron fist. He was like the CEO that was installed to instill fear.
This is not a commentary on Elon Musk. This is not a commentary.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see. I'm really interested to see. I hope I'm not coloring your opinion. I mean, I definitely am coloring your opinion, probably of what you should think of Changxin. But I mean, make up your own mind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually interested.
Write us an email. Write us an email. Our email is open.
I'm very interested to hear rational perspectives of why Changxin is bad main character, I guess, or a not interesting one. But if your reasons are just like, oh, she's a soft-hearted girl who doesn't have the stomach for destroying Tristellaris, like that's not interesting to me, and that's not a valid reason for her not to be a good character. So one other thing I wanted to talk about, and as I was thinking about it, so in this chapter, we're introduced to the Dark Forest theory, which is mind-blowing, and I'm pretty sure this is one of the big things you think about when you think of the book now in the series, and it's not like a one and done thing. Like, it's prevalent through the next book. Like, the entire book is kind of based off the Dark Forest. The humanities understand the Dark Forest principle now. Like I talked about, we have the deterrence era, which drives like the first half or more of the book of just waiting, kind of the detente between Earth and Tristellaris and like what that looks like. And then when that's broken, when deterrence fails, like there's a whole other section that happens because of that. And then we have the Singer chapter, which is the other alien race, that the kind of even more superior alien race that destroys our solar system and may have destroyed someone destroys Tristellaris. We don't know who, but it could have been Singer too in his race. They seem to be the kind of cleansers who go and just like, as people broadcast, they just destroy them as their job. And it's more like kind of rote. It's like there's a workman going there and just like, all right, we got to find stars and destroy them. That's what you do. And then we also have at the very end, Changxin and AA go in a Lightspeed ship to a really distant planet, which they don't have a name for it. It's called Planet Blue, because it has bluegrass. They also meet up with some of the people from the ships that descended from Zhongbei High, the blue space.
Yeah,
they
improbably. They're also here.
They meet up with them, and one of the super interesting parts to me is that world is really built on the Dark Forest principle, where it's a super societal taboo to talk about where you're from or where you are, and giving any kind of information about like your location is really, really frowned upon. And it's dangerous because
rude.
everyone,
it's rude because we could use that information to kill you.
Right. So like the whole universe kind of knows about, or the whole this universe knows about the Dark Forest principle, and then how dangerous it is. So the entire book is kind of built upon that. Where I think there's not a lot of through lines between book 1 and book 2. I think there's like the Tristellar and Sophons, but like not that much that ties it together. But like it really feels like book 3 is built on the foundation of book 2 to me.
Definitely, yeah.
So I guess, I mean, understanding the Dark Forest principle, I would say is important. I mean, I don't know, like there's a lot of information that kind of come at you. And I think similar to the Sophon chapter, there's a lot of information that comes at you. You're like, you have to process it. So like, I guess, do you understand the Dark Forest principle now? I mean, like, was it written well enough, or do you need to go back and reread it, or where are you at with it?
No, I think I understood the Dark Forest principle. Yeah, I thought it was fairly clear. And I'm one of those people where anytime the title of the book or the movie is in a scene, I kind of pay more attention because I figure it's important. So yeah.
I was saying
like the seemingly unimportant snow project being the title of our show.
Yeah, I struggled with like what to call the last episode. I was like, Snow Project, that's going to be like, no one's going to know what that means. So, so I tried to keep those titles for the next one. Exactly.
Did you like that final scene between Da Shi and Luoji, when Da Shi is almost saying, oh, okay, well, explain it to me in a really simple way, and Luoji's just ice cold. He's like, anyone can understand. It's very simple. And that's what we end up seeing in the third book, is like, this is something that's not understood by intellectuals and philosophers, like every child born on every world knows this. That it's just like, look both ways before you cross the street because the world is really dangerous.
Right. Don't give it your coordinates because you're going to get blown up by a photoid.
Same, yeah. I really like that final conversation that they have, like lighting cigarettes to be those small points of light, like the points of light in the dark forest. I just thought it was very well done.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like exposition dumps go, like it was really well done and simple to understand, and I think I conveyed the message really well. And also like Dasher's reaction about like, oh man, that is dark, like not only like is this like a theory that like kind of builds that like moves them on to the next level, but it's like, oh, the universe is way darker than I expected. Like it's not, I think we as humanity have like this idea of like, oh, we're going to meet this other species and they're going to come here and they're going to, we're going to be friends and share technology. But it's like, no, they're just going to kill
We're
you.
We're going to teach them our ways.
Right.
It's like the arrogant view.
Right. I really like the analogy of when the G says like the humanity, just like the kids next to the bonfire yelling like, hey, look at us. I really like that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of what made, for me anyway, is the dark force theory more sticky is both Dan and Thalia and others just emphasizing the two rules of civilization, that their own survival is the most important thing. So I think that also helped make it much more clear when they did get to this explanation.
It's true, because it's like it's more important than getting better resources. Like, oh, well, they'll be my friends because we have a symbiotic relationship. No, like their survival comes first. And it's more important than loyalty. It's always survival is that primary need.
Yeah, and then the change of suspicion show that like even if you do think you have cooperation, like you don't know what they're thinking, and that just continues on and on, especially with any kind of communication barrier to impede that cooperation. And I like also they're saying like with interspecies communication, that you can resolve it with a conversation between like great distances and different civilizations and different star systems or whatever. It's just impossible, and so it's just way easier just to fire and
easier
and
for offense, but also for defense. Like the only way to be safe is to prevent yourself from getting new technology, prevent yourself from like discovering new things. But if it threatens your survival, again, we see that falling in the favor of survival.
Yeah.
The most.
Yeah, and then that reminds me of the humanity is like preparing for the inevitable attack, the quote unquote inevitable photoid attack that's going to come. Like they have the different ideas, and there's like this idea of a cosmic safety notice, and like how can you tell the universe that we are not dangerous? And there's a whole different varied reactions. Surprise to surprise, like Leo Shijin has like different factions of thought about how to
of course, I forgot about that.
Yeah, how to
oh my gosh,
how to
make so right.
achieve that. So like we have 3 different ways to deal with it. And so like
count me out for that factions convo. I'm sure the guest stars. I don't even think we hyped up the guests enough. The next season is going to be incredible because it's all the hosts that you love and then new guest stars that you might have recognized from interviews, and they're going to give unique perspectives. I know it sounds like I'm behind on listening to the main show. That's extenuating circumstances. I usually am glued to this show. I love listening. Really, I do.
Thank you. I'm in it for the factions. I love it. Every time he introduces like, new trees of factions, like I'm into it. So Amin, actually had another question for you as you were talking about the title of Dark Forest having significance towards the end of it. What would you guess that Death's End means? And we're not going to give you the answer, but we'll revisit it later on.
I'm guessing it probably has 2 meanings. So one is probably the actual physical death of the solar system from, I forgot who you said, from Singer or whoever that is. So it probably refers to the end of the Earth and human civilization as we know it. And then I don't know this for a fact, but it's probably some other scientific event, or probably some other space related event that happens that helps the humans in some way. I don't know. That would be my guess.
Okay.
Am I close?
Good answer. I would say that the answer is not going to be as mind blowing as Dark Forest, but it's
okay.
it is mentioned later on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, any final things you want to talk about, or any other stuff that you want to talk about before we just dive into get ready for the new book?
What did you think? Yeah, I guess final thought would be, what about that final conversation that we have with the Trisolaran, who contacts Luoji and his wife when they're together with his daughter?
That wasn't my favorite part. It was nice.
Would it have been better to leave it out, I guess, is my question.
Well, I like that they connected back with the Trisolaran. I like closing that loop, but I don't know that, quote, love is the answer was the best closing, I guess. It seemed a little hokey.
Yeah, it's hard to end that book, right? Like, how can you end it?
Yeah.
Did you like it, Thalia?
It gave me false hope. I was like, oh, other people think that way, and then the third book sort of crushed that.
It does. It crushes. It takes a while for it to crush it, right? Like, you think like, oh, okay, well, we're gonna cooperate, and like it just turns it on its head again.
It could be that Dan is right, and it's hard to end a book like that. I just was, I guess, surprised because I thought that the conversation between Luoji and Dashu was kind of it. I was definitely expecting it to end, and then it's like, oh, field trip to humanity's gravitational device or whatever they go visit.
I thought it was actually really cool how they kind of seeded that the already humans and Trisolarans are cooperating by having the gravitational antennas that they said they're going to help us build. The Luoji says like, oh, it's a really well-known Trisolaran saying about this thing, right? So they already like have this like cultural collaboration, and you can see that you think like humanity and Trisolarans are like already kind of like cooperating more, and like maybe we won't even need deterrence later on because like we're such good friends now.
Right.
Yeah, they're really seeding that kind of idea really early on. So I think that was cool.
Well, I just want to say thanks to Dan and Thalia for spoiling this book for me, and also for spoiling the entire series. I'm looking forward to, I guess, technically 2 seasons from now, but the next book. So to all our listeners, thanks for listening. If you have comments, you can email us at rehydrate@fastmail.com or on Twitter at rehydratepod. And join us next season when we start reading Death's End. And the first episode will be The Staircase Program, which is Part 1 of Death's End by Lucy Shin. Thanks all.